Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is Bookologist Stephanie Affinito of A Lit Life. She's going to chat with us about a new concept called Bookology, which is the study of books and reading and notebooks and writing, mixed with mindfulness and creativity to bring you restorative reading and writing. Stephanie states on her website that books and reading have the power to transform our lives. We meet new friends, travel to locations, experience new perspectives, and learn valuable life lessons with each turn of the page. And when we explore the themes of the book in our own lives, from love and relationships to baking and gardening, magic happens. The book leaves us a better person than when we started. She blogs about the power of leading literate lives and podcasts weekly on books and reading, writing and notebooks, and everything in between on Get Literate. She also chats with a new children's literature author every week on her Kidlit Love podcast. I'm excited to be chatting today with Stephanie. Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Bookologist Stephanie Affinito of A Lit Life, and she's going to talk with us about this new concept called Bookology. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me, Terry. I am so excited for our conversation.
Oh, so am I. I'm really excited to kind of explore this whole idea of Bookology. But before we really get into it, why don't you give our listeners just a quick understanding of who you are and kind of what you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm Stephanie, and I have been a lifelong reader and writer, right? I was always that kid with the book in my hands, the notebook in my hands, who would avoid everything else possible to just tuck myself away somewhere quietly and get lost in someone else's world. It always seemed better than mine. And that lifelong love of reading and writing fueled me to a career in education. I started teaching elementary school. I realized the only thing I wanted to teach was reading and writing. So I quickly shifted gears to become a literacy specialist where I could just read and write with kids all day long. And from there, ended up working with teachers as an instructional coach to help more kids develop that love of reading and writing that I myself had. And, fast forward a bunch of years and a couple of degrees, I currently find myself teaching teachers who want to become literacy specialists and do the same thing that I did. And I pretty much just shout my love of reading and writing from the rooftops wherever I go, both in my work as an educator, but also outside of that, working with people. I have my own podcast as well, just really celebrating what reading and writing can do for us and what it can bring into our lives.
Absolutely. Recently, you kind of came up with this term. It is now a real thing, right? And it's Bookology. And when you first brought that up to me, I was like one of your biggest fans. I said, "Oh my gosh, that's the best concept in the world." What is that? So I've got a bunch of listeners out here that are saying a Bookology. Like what exactly is that?
Yes. And you were the first person I ever spoke that word out loud to. And I was so grateful for your enthusiasm around it. So to explain it a little bit, I feel like I have to go backwards a bit to the beginning. I mentioned that I was a reader and writer from the very beginning. And books and notebooks were always close by. But it was in my teenage years, my early teenage years, I became sick with a chronic illness that really took me out for a couple of years, in and out of doctors and clinics and hospitals and all of the things, and really just restricted to some bed rest for a really long time. And so my love of reading and writing turned into more than a love. It turned into my lifelines, because those are the only things I was physically capable of doing. And so those characters I met, they became my real life friends. And the notebooks that I used to doodle in, they became my outlet my way to get out all of my frustrations onto the page. And so I knew early on that reading and writing had the power to make me feel better. I didn't understand why. I just knew that it worked. I kept doing it. Eventually, I actually ended up connecting with a book, reading a book that led me to the doctor, to the treatments that actually got me well. So I really feel like reading and writing, it's so much more than just the pastime.
Exactly.
Yeah. So fast forward, a whole bunch of years later, reading and writing still very important to my life, my work, reading and writing with my kids. And then I end up in my 40s with that illness deciding to come back and wondering what the heck do I do? How do I start over? How do I fix this? And I went to a bazillion doctors and tried every single possible healing modality in the
Right.
world I could. And I finally realized, okay, what worked back then? What was the one thing that really helped me during this time? And it, of course, was reading and writing. But this time, I was armed with a whole lot of years of schooling and the ability to dive in deep to figure out why. Why did reading and writing help me feel better? How could it help me feel better? How could it lead me to whatever my next steps need to be? And so I began studying all of this, the power of reading, the physical, the mental, the emotional benefits, the same with writing. What happens when we do mix in other modalities like creativity and mindfulness and yoga and aromatherapy and all the things? What happens when we really harness the power of all of those? And so people would ask me, what do you do? What do you study? What do you like? I started talking about it on the podcast, and I realized I needed a name. I needed a term to sum up what I love to explore and investigate. And I couldn't find one. So I made it up. And that is where Bookology comes from, which basically in my world, and now officially in the world, because I do have a trademark from the government. Bookology is the study of books and reading, notebooks and writing, mixed with mindfulness and creativity to help us feel better and create a life we love.
And I love that. So first of all, everyone, this is Stephanie, the new Shakespeare, who makes up words to fit what she needs, right? So that's fantastic. But I love that idea that books are more than just a story. They're more than just entertainment. And it's something that as an author that I have felt, this idea that when I write, yes, I want my readers to have a good story. I mean, that is definitely key, but I want them to have more if they want more. If they're looking for more than a quick beach read that just, takes them away, I want more that they can find. And so I like that idea. And I said that when my first book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, came out, and it's about Ukrainian women. And with the Ukrainian crisis, I said it helps people develop an empathy for a culture they may know nothing about.
Yes.
And so that's Bookology.
Yes, that's
Right.
it exactly. It's taking what could just be, a hobby or something you love to do and really harnessing the power of the page, right? And really thinking about, what is this book saying to me? Why maybe did I need to pick it up? What's between the lines that I could pull from my own life? What are the actions that maybe I learned from the characters or a different way of thinking or being that can help me be better in my real life outside of those pages? That's exactly it.
So I think what's very interesting about this is when I first had you come on, I was thinking maybe we would talk more about like the notebooking. And I think we will definitely get to some notebooking. But you said something to me that really struck a chord, which is, I think as authors, we often wonder, what is the value of our books? We have trouble finding that value. So when it comes time to market, we're almost apologetic marketers. Like, well, I have this book and maybe whatever, and if someone says, well, what's the value of the book? You almost feel embarrassed that you're charging money for it, despite the fact that you've put your heart and soul and life into, writing these characters. There's this I don't know, this idea that, well, reading is a hobby, and should people really be spending money here when maybe they should be spending money on, I don't know, organic vegetables, like, that
Yeah.
feel. This idea of Bookology changes that.
Yes. Yes, it really does. Books are tools, right? Yes, they are wonderful pastimes and hobbies, and we can read them with no other expectation other to just simply ingest them and enjoy them. But if we look at them as tools to change our lives, to make lives better, to learn something new about the world that we didn't know before that makes me a better person, you have to shout your books from the rooftops because someone is waiting. Someone is waiting for that message. And I think that's why I love my work right now, is because I am that middleman. So I made up the word bookology, and I also made up my title, which means I must be a bookologist. And I think my true love, my true passion is connecting people with the right book that they need right now. And we can't do that unless authors keep writing about those very important stories and then aren't apologetic and
Exactly.
sharing them widely and shouting what they could do and really thinking about, who needs this book right now? If I don't talk about this book, if I don't share it, if I don't put that story out there, someone might not get the message that they are waiting for. And so I do
Right.
think it just puts a whole different light on why it is so important to, first of all, to read and to read as much as we can, which means all of you have to write and write as much as you can. But that we need all sorts of books with all sorts of stories and characters and problems and solutions so that the readers can really find whatever message is waiting for them.
Right. So it's a little different than what you hear in a marketing seminar where they talk about, like, who is your reader? Who is your end user? And you take it a little further,
Mm-hmm.
because it isn't just who is your reader, but who needs this book right now.
Yes. Yes.
So
Who needs
for
it?
yeah, how how do you go about, I know one of the things that you offer is you do these little, like, people can contact you, they tell you a little bit about themselves, and then you give them book ideas. You say, well, here's some things I think
Yeah.
would be good for you. What do you call that? You have that
I,
service. What is it called?
I do. It's another really fun name. It's called a book apothecary, which
Okay.
basically is
Right.
just a collection of books that's for whatever you want in this season of life. Yeah. So
Right.
I'm all about the
How do
fun
you,
books.
how do you go about distilling these books down? Like you read books. I know you read a lot of books. And
Mhm.
how do you distill them down to become apothecary titles? Because I think what's good about that for an author to know is that helps them to distill their own books down so that they can now look for those people who are looking for what they have to offer. What are you doing to get to that point where you can say, here's a woman who says, and she has this list, and you say, and here are the 4 books I'm going to suggest to her.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, first I'm reading a lot
Right.
because all of the books that I recommend are books that I have read. And I really just come at it as a reader of how is this book impacting me? So a lot of it is very personal, but I have a framework that I tend to read books with this framework in mind when I'm creating book apothecaries. And I recommend it to readers to create a framework for themselves to help them choose books. And it's a really simple framework that is called Be, Feel, and Do. So
Okay.
how do I want to feel? Who do I want to be? I said them out of order, but that's
That's right.
okay. And what do I want to do? And then thinking about from that place who you are and what you want to grow into, what books do you need next? And so when I have my book apothecary sessions with people, I ask them those questions and just get them talking. And then, all the bells and whistles start to go off in my mind of, oh, maybe this book, maybe this book, maybe this book. And now I find myself reading books with that framework in mind. Okay, who is this book good for? What is an identity that this character embodies that someone else who wants to embody that identity might need? Or the opposite. what is it identity that someone might not embody, but they need to have that perspective as well. How does this book make me feel? How could it make someone else feel? And, what are the things that the book might inspire us to do? I'm all about micro actions from the books that I read. As an example, your most recent, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, I went down the rabbit hole of herbs and flowers and what's good for you and which ones you can eat and what you put them in edible, cupcakes with flower petals on top. And some of that is just plain old fun. Books can spark actions that can just make life feel better, make life feel bigger. And then some of them, of course, are more serious. Characters going through challenging times or really serious issues can make readers feel less alone when they are going through them as well. And then, maybe even find a way out of whatever feeling they are in to some feeling that feels a little bit better.
Right. I agree. And I have watched you. So I do know that you do things, because you will read a book and the next thing I know, she's trying some kind of, lemon cupcakes or something from some, right?
Lemon meringue pie.
Yeah. Lemon. That's what it was. Lemon meringue pie. So there is this idea of you read and you do. So as an author then who's saying, okay, I want to find the people who need my book, you need to look at your book with that framework.
Yes.
What does when you wrote it and when you're reading it, what is it that people would feel? What is it that they would, what was the other one? What are they?
The identity they want to be, how they want to feel.
How they want to feel. And then what might it prompt them to do? And then when you look at it in that framework, your book has now become valuable almost in the way that we often see nonfiction is very valuable.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I've noticed is nonfiction authors don't have a problem stating the value of their book, because they are solving a specific problem that is probably stated in the title or in the subtitle.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly, this is what needs to happen. This is what we're doing. We're talking about real estate. We're talking about how to handle your finances. We're talking about, 16 herbal remedies that will, solve your gastric issues. I mean, whatever it is, right? But when you say Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, you're kind of like, well, it's a cute book, and you get that feeling. And so this is a way to change that conversation.
It is, because using that book as an example, like thinking about identities you want to embrace. What kind of woman do you want to be? How is who you are today shaped by those that came before you and those that might come after you? How do you want to feel in relation to the relationships you have with your parents, with your mother, with your grandmother, and where that goes? And what do you want to do with your life? And how do you make those decisions and reckon with the different competing philosophies and opinions of your family members, right? That is the part of at least that version or that book of yours that people wouldn't know unless someone was shouting it, saying, hey, this isn't just a book. This is an indispensable tool for your growth and well-being. And then tell them how.
And so there you have the words to use. This isn't just a book. This is an indispensable tool for your growth and well-being. Mark that down. But no, I love that idea to be able to see what we're doing as authors as more than just, I'm creating a cute story for someone to read.
Yes. You're changing people's lives.
That it has value. And that, I know that it's interesting. The first time that I read a book, I was in high school, I think, before I really recognized that books were more than just my escape. I loved books. I read books. I mean, I was under the covers with flashlights with books. That's what I did. But I always felt that it was just a good story, a good escape, a good way to get, out of wherever I was. And then I took an English lit class, and the teacher started going on and on about what did the author mean? What are the themes in this book? And I thought, whoa, you mean there's a whole nother layer to these books?
Yeah.
right? So what's interesting is when I wrote Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, I wrote the story. I wrote it the way it came from my heart. And then my editor helped, they come in and do things. And then it's time to write the book blurb on the back. And I'm struggling mightily. And she said to me, well, what are the themes in this book? And I looked at her as though she had 18 heads. And I thought, themes? It's a book. I wrote a story. And she starts spouting off the themes that she saw. And I thought, oh, I've done that. And I think I did it very naturally because I'm such a reader. I know it needs to be there. And so it was there, but I didn't even fully recognize what I was doing. And so it's that idea of looking for something beyond the storyline.
Yes. Yeah. Why does the reader need your book, and how can it help them whatever they happen to be looking for?
Absolutely. Well, let's shift just a little bit and talk about the notebooking side, because I'm, when you say the word like journal, I shudder. I don't journal. I have a really hard time with that idea, but there's more than one way to journal. It doesn't have to be Dear Diary. Here are the 18 things I did today and the 3 reasons I wish I changed them. Like, that's one kind, but there's way more than that. So talk a little bit about the notebooking, and then kind of help us understand how would that help someone like an author to be better at what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's why I purposely don't use the term journaling, because it conjures up a lot of things for people. And so I say notebooking. I feel like notebooking is more accessible. It has a broader connotation of just whatever happens to come up on the page. And so when I think of notebooking, there are 5 different kinds of notebooking, at least at this point in my journey, that I have figured out. You've got your traditional productive notebooking, people who make to-do lists, who jot out a plan or an agenda for the day. That is a pretty popular one. Then you have the reflective kind of notebooking, which I think a lot of people think about with journaling. It's the Dear Diary, it's the morning pages, it's the notebook that will never be seen in the light of day and should be burned.
Right. Because that's where you let it all out. Yeah.
That's right. Then we've got more creative writing, where maybe people are bringing art or sketching or washi tape and stickers and all of the fun things, and getting more creative with their kinds of writing they're putting on the page. And the fourth one is more commemorative. It's writing for memory keeping. It's 5-year journals. It's writing something in your calendar every day. And then there's the fifth, which I think ties very closely to our work as readers and your work as writers, which is responsive notebooking, which is something in my day, whether it is a book I read, something I saw on social media, a prompt someone put out there, that is put in my orbit for a reason. And so I'm going to write about it. It's bringing something up. It's causing a feeling in me. It's making me think. And it's something that if I write about it, maybe I can uncover what it is. So I think now those 5 types of writing certainly are not writing that we all do every day and have special notebooks for. I have a bazillion notebooks on purpose because I love them. But really, I think any kind of notebooking that seems to be the one that's right for you, because probably listeners right now probably identified with at least one of those categories of something that they do. Right. And I think that notebooking habit, whatever it looks like for you, it just supports a writing life in general, right? Things are worth writing down. They're worth putting on the page for whatever purpose we need them. And so keeping a notebook just keeps that writing at the forefront. It keeps especially all the research we have on the powers of writing. Well, most of the research we have is that old-fashioned pen to paper kind of notebooking is really helpful. It helps our memory. It helps spark our creativity. So I think notebooking in general could support a notebooking habit, or a reading habit, excuse me. But if we look at that responsive category, in my world of Bookology, I teach people how reading and writing can make life better. The physical benefits, the cognitive, and the emotional. So if you have reading benefits on one hand and writing on the other, let's pair them together. Let's get the bang
Right.
for our buck and pair them together. And so this
Right.
responsive writing is something that I encourage people to do, and I do all the time when I am reading a book. The book is there to teach me something, right? And you come into a book, or I teach people to come into the book with an open mind and an open heart. Right? Why did this book? There are a bazillion books that could have landed in your hands, and this
Right.
one is here. So why? And so I like to encourage people to do something on the page to deepen the reading experience. Now, nothing big, nothing that is work, nothing that takes away from the enjoyment, but a lot of us love to pull lines that jumped out at us, those compelling quotes, those pages or those pieces that we can't stop reading. I encourage them to write them down, to notebook them, to keep them close. As we read, we often have strong emotions as readers as we read, like we're either rooting for the character or we hate the character. Well, why? Why do you feel that way? What's the message in that as well? And so
Right.
I encourage in a lot of different options so that people can find one that's right for them, to think about why the reading experience in that particular book, why it matters to them right now. And so then we can compare and combine all of those benefits. And so as authors writing those books, right, you can, and I don't write fiction, I've only written nonfiction. So I'm saying you can, meaning please do, because I don't do myself. Like really think about what lines would jump out at people to make them stop and think and teach them something. What aspects of the character or what plot elements might have readers stop and have some sort of strong emotion? And, I don't like star rating categories. I mean, that's probably a whole nother episode, but I rate books based on hearts. How did it touch my heart? And that means I could have loved the book, but it also means it could have triggered a different emotion. And that means I need that book just as much. And so just kind of thinking through that on the page, it just helps us get so much more out of our reading life and really makes that book that indispensable tool that we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think too that notebooking might be a good way. I mean, one of the problems that authors often experience at some point is a writer's block. Now, I've got some authors who don't believe in writer's block. I don't actually believe that it's a thing as much as that it's the way I see writer's block is your mind is too busy on other things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a problem. There's something going on that's taking up that bandwidth that you would use for creativity. And therefore you can't be creative. There's too many things going on in your life. I've experienced this a multitude of times. And once I get whatever that big thing is either fixed or I find a way to like corral it into a box that I can set aside for a few moments, then the creativity has a chance to flow. And I think notebooking might be a good way to help take whatever that thing is. And it could be as simple as I need to make time, and therefore having a good list of what I'm going to do to catch up to get myself back into a place where I have a spare hour.
Yeah.
That might be it. Or it could be understanding these feelings that you have about this event that's happened and being able to now at least identify them instead of have them swirling around in your head.
Yes. So. My favorite technique for not just getting on a writer's block, but just getting unstuck in life in general is just it's your typical brain dump with a twist. So it's open up that notebook page, get your favorite writing utensil, and literally just list everything that is on your mind vying for your attention, no matter how big or how small. List it down, get it all out so it's off of your head and onto the page. That's really what I learned when I was sick as a kid, that if I could do that, I could have space in my body for better feelings. But when you get that big long list there, the next step is what's crucial. And that is to get a highlighter, whatever favorite color you have, if you like, get a highlighter, and then you go down the list and you highlight the items on the list that you can actually control. And you highlight them so they stand out. And then you look at that list, because chances are it's now shorter, right? Because we
Exactly.
worry about everything that
Right,
we can
right.
and cannot control.
Right.
And then I look at that highlighted list and I circle one thing. What is one thing I could do in this very moment, right now, before I close my notebook page, that could make life feel better and make me feel like I at least took a step in the direction? There's just something about getting it off of you onto a page where you can see it, you can see what's really in your control and what's not, and then taking that one little action,
Doing something with it. Right.
yes, can
Right.
free you up for what you actually want to do, which is write or do something more creative.
Right. Right. I love that idea. I've always been one where people will like have an aha moment and they'll say, "Oh, I learned something." And then my question is, and what are you going to do differently because of it?
Yes.
Because if the answer is nothing, then what you learned was useless.
Yes. Yes,
You
that
know?
is it right there. That is
Yeah.
my whole way of working with books and notebooks is what I just call the inspired action. So what?
Yeah.
What
So
what are
what?
you going to do? Whether it's something fun like baking the lemon meringue pie that we mentioned, or is it having a hard conversation with someone because the character did, and maybe you can too. So there's so
Or
many.
is it even just thinking about a situation a little differently? The
Yes.
next time this kind of thing comes up, instead of having my knee-jerk reaction, I'm going to stop and I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to listen. And I'm going to listen until the person is done speaking before I make a decision.
Yes.
Something is like, and that can change things. I know that one of the things I've heard several times, I have a character in Daughters who she's difficult. She's a hard character. Carrie Ann, she likes her world just so, and everything has to be, it's her way or the highway. There's only one way to do things. And she knows what the right way is. And if you'll just follow her, and she's not terribly likable, but you can see how she got where she was. And you want to shake her sometimes. And every now and then I'll do something and I'll think, oh, I'm being a Carrie Ann. I need to be less Carrie Ann here. I need to try to be a Maggie or a Josie May. Like how can I be a Josie May instead of a Carrie Ann? And so
Yes.
even something like that will let you in your mind go, oh, I'm just recognizing something here.
Yes.
Right?
And what I love about that, Terry, is that stories and the characters that we encounter may sometimes be the only mentors for whatever it is we're trying to do or who we want to be. They may be the only mentors we have in our immediate space. And
Right.
without them, it is so much harder to make those changes. I
figure it
do
out.
that often. What would so and so do, or what would this person do? And yeah, I just love that you did that for your own characters.
Yeah. Well, and I think that as an author, I know that the characters that I create are pieces of me. Like, I don't know how to write a character that doesn't have something of me in there.
Yeah.
And I'm not Carrie Ann. I'm not that rigid, but there are times that I am. There are places in my life that are very rigid, that I feel very, very connected to how I'm going to do it. And so I could understand her, right?
Me
But
too.
I also know how it isn't effective a lot of times. And
Yeah.
so seeing it written in the book, and then that means that if I'm doing it, other people are too, because like you just said, you also understand that need for control and,
Yes.
have it my way, and we can't be the only two people in the world that have felt that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's kind of, I think that authors provide a human experience that allow readers to connect and see themselves. I tell people all the time, my characters are me as I was, as I am, or as I wish I was.
Yes. Oh, I love that, because what I say is that, books can help us feel seen, but they also help us see.
Right.
We have both sides.
Right. And in Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, I was often saying, I don't have contact with many people from Ukraine. I've never been there. I have zero idea of what it would like to be like to live in a war-torn country. But reading a book like that now gives me friends in this country. So now when I see a news story come on about Ukraine, I immediately think of these 3 women that I've gotten to know.
Yes.
And what I hear on the news matters more than it did before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. There's the research behind that talks about mirror neurons in our brain that, when something happens to someone and we are witnessing it, then the same sections of our brain, the same neurons in our brain, they activate as if it were happening to us. Now, certainly not at the same level, but there is some stuff going on that helps us feel for that person, to have that empathy for that person. And what the exciting research to me shows is that we get that same mirror neuron effect, not just by watching it happen to someone live, but by reading about it.
Yeah.
I mean, books are empathy building machines. Like we think differently when we're done. Like you said, all the things going on in the world have a brand new context, a brand new connotation for us.
Right.
Because we do know people there now. Whether they were fictional or not, they changed the way that we think.
I think books can also give us a window into things that maybe we can't discuss out loud. For instance, right now, there are certain topics that if you try to have a discussion in a group of people, it's gonna turn into a free-for-all. And before long, you're going to be labeled as something because you didn't agree with someone else. And then it gets to a point where it's like, it's easier just not to look at that topic. We're just going to stay inside. So, racism, for instance, it can turn very ugly very quickly if you don't have people who have cool heads that are willing to listen. But you can explore that while reading, because you're reading alone. Nobody is in your head. Nobody can hear your first initial thoughts. And it allows you to explore, well, do I like the way that person handled that?
Right.
How might I have handled that?
Yeah.
Oh, what if I would have handled it similarly? Would I want to change? What would I do to change? You can do all that internally.
Yes.
And so now you've had a discussion on racism that did not require you walking away feeling like a racist.
Yes.
Instead, it empowered you to say, there are some things I might be able to change, and I'm going to work on that.
Right.
Right.
I was going to say, which could then lead you to your next book, right? To then strategically choose
exactly
that you read. There's a really great quote by Jim Rohn. You are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with.
Right.
Which, it's kind of scary to think about a little bit.
Yeah.
And I ask people, what if you were the average of the last 5 books that you read?
Right.
What will that say about you? Is that the message that you want to portray? And so I think this kind of thinking and reflection around a book helps you choose the next book and the next version of yourself as you keep going.
And as authors, it might also help us to choose what we might want to write next.
Yes.
Like, what are those things in our heads that aren't going anywhere? Those concepts, those things that you feel compelled to share with the world. What are they? And now how can we put that into a story?
Yeah.
Because stories make difficult topics more palatable.
Yes. And that's where you can open up your notebook and start jotting down those ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Stephanie, what are you up to right now? Do you have anything new in the works? Any plans? I know you've got 2 wonderful podcasts. So let's shout those out. We've got Get Literate, right?
Yes. Get Literate is my weekly podcast for adults who want to explore this idea of Bookology and figure out how to use reading and writing to make life better, which part of it is, first of all, how do I find the time to read and write?
Right.
Then what do I read and write? And then what do I do after that? So that comes out weekly on Tuesdays. And then my second podcast is truly a passion project, a labor of love. I am an educator. I teach teachers, and I love children's literature. And so I recently, at the end of 2023, started Kid Lit Love, which is where it's like, pinch me, I get to do this, but I get to have a conversation with a children's literature author every week on a new book that they are are releasing so that we can teach our kids that reading and writing can be these kinds of tools too. So my podcasts are, it's my favorite times of the week. But I also go beyond that, and I work with people who want a little bit more support in how to do this work. I have a course called Grow a Restorative Reading Practice, which basically tells you how to do all these wonderful things. Lean into your already there love of reading and writing so that it can become that kind of self-care transformational tool. And I, as we mentioned, create book apothecaries, which is so much fun to do. It's getting to know someone, having a conversation and chatting, and then coming back and presenting them with books that I think they might need to read next or would want to read next based on what they have shared. And I play book matchmaker.
Yeah. I love that. I also know, and I'm going to put it out into the world for you, that you're writing, that you have a middle grade fiction that you are trying to write. And so now that I've set it out into the world, you have to finish it. And
I see what you did there.
Yes. And you have a few other projects that I know that you're working on. And I just love that you find a way to take these passions of yours and turn them into something. So Stephanie, if people wanted to get up with you, they'd like to do an apothecary, or they would like to know more about this whole idea of Bookology, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is to head online to my website. It's alitlife.com. And from that homepage, you can either find my Get Literate podcast, if that's what interests you, or the Kid Lit Love podcast. And that's where you can find out information about my restorative reading course and a bunch of freebies on there, like bookish spreadsheets and questions to ask yourself while you read, my favorite book calendars. There's so many things that I just try to funnel all in that one place. And on social media and just about all the platforms, I am Affinito Lit, short for literacy. So you can find me there too.
Wonderful. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being with me today. We had a wonderful conversation, and I know readers and authors are going to really enjoy what they've learned here today.
Thank you so much, Terry. This was so much fun. I loved it.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.